Wherever I go, I see whenever you're interacting with people one-on-one, everybody seems to favor freedom.
The land of Arcadia.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics. And today I'm excited to have a special guest on who's doing a lot of things along the lines of the freedom, liberty, breaking away from a lot of the indoctrination with the dollar and the debt bubbles, but really mixing the economics and also a spiritual perspective. So it's very exciting to have Luis Fernando Mises on. He writes for Jeff Berwick's The Dollar Vigilante, also does some leadership consulting, and I had the pleasure of meeting back at Libertopia Festival in San Diego, where he was talking about a lot of great things. So Luis, it's great to have you on here. Great to catch up with you again today. How are you doing, my friend?
Super happy to be here with you and to see you again, sir.
Yeah, well, one of the things that initially struck me when I came into your presentation, and we talked a little bit before we started the interview, where certainly there's the things going on with the dollar, the government's building tanks and all this stuff that perhaps isn't ideal. Yet one of the things I really appreciate that you've done is, you highlight those things, but also in a calm, positive way, you're doing a lot to bring about the solutions and give people a better way of thinking, because there is a lot of the mental perspective. So perhaps just if you could share a little bit about what you've been up to and some of the things you're doing that I think would really be fascinating for people to hear.
Sure, thank you. Whenever we first wake up to the truth of the concentration camp mentality that the state programs into us from birth, and it gets continued by schooling and government schooling, all this stuff. When we wake up, we're angry because we feel like we've been duped, we've been lied to, and for so many years, and all our energy, like they steal our money and they use it for nefarious purposes. So we're like pissed, right? And we're angry, but we don't know what to do because we feel so powerless. So a lot of times you see that on Facebook or social media or like get-togethers, people are just angry about all these things, and we can be angry. I think that's healthy, that's fine, sure, but then what? Are you going to stay angry, or are you going to do something about it? Mm-hmm. So that's I've been doing shamanism since 2011, and that's actually what turned me into a voluntarist, an anarchist. And what I've been learning through all of these, 7-8 years, is that the answer actually is inside of us. The current manifestation of government is, it's because of our current mentality. So we have that right and wrong, like I have to be right, and then therefore you're wrong, and punishment and reward, like really black and white thinking, instead of actually trying to understand each other, instead of actually trying to listen to each other. We want to feel like we're right. So that's the kind of programming that we've been given, and that is a faulty programming. So like any computer, that you have some program that doesn't work, you remove it, you put another one that works, suddenly your computer works better, faster, easier, more efficiently. So the way to do this is to work with ourselves, in ourselves, for to create new synapses, to create new connections, and to see things for what they are, and how our reaction and our responses to life are basically what creates and maintains that status quo, or it can change it. And I think it's a little bit related to, like, Jordan Peterson's #1 rule is, and he says, keep your house in check before you can start judging the world. Because, like everybody's house is a complete mess. Well, not everybody's, right? Some of us keep a clean house, but, some people's houses are a mess, but they're trying to change the world, make it better. Well, if you start with your own house, cleaning it and making sure that your kids are fed and that you pay attention to people around you, all of those things will create a ripple effect instead of just trying to focus on the outside. So there's various things that we do on that, but yeah, that's the gist of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that, Luis, because I get it why a lot of the messaging in this sector is about things that are perhaps unpleasant to digest on first glance with, is the economy going to collapse? Is the stock market going to collapse? Yet I think, again, I didn't quite grasp this when I was back on Wall Street, but studying a lot of the things similar, like you're mentioning, where, you know, I just see this pattern of we've been conditioned, especially as Americans, this country did this, so we'll one up them, we'll blow them up faster. And it's like you have a couple thousand years track record of trying that. And in the end, it's cost a lot of lives, cost untold amounts of money. And what I found interesting, especially listening to people like Jeff and yourself that dig into it a bit more, how a lot of what these guys do is based on creating that dark energy, that anger, where, you know, I remember thinking, all right, we have Republicans and Democrats, they're all spending a lot of money, going a lot of wars, but more so they get the people riled up fighting against each other, rather than seeing, wait a second, this is two wings of the same baseball team here. You know, they're just splitting it up and using that as a smokescreen. So I'm curious your thoughts on anything you've heard along those lines, and, you know, how you go about really changing the perspective of, okay, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I shouldn't like this guy, or because even the idea where I was born in the US, this guy was born in Russia, so we're not people, we're on different sides. Whereas what if we all just treated each other as people, and, you know, and cared and respected each other, which again is nice because it seems like that's really what you're advocating and spreading.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that if we go to nomenclatures, the idea is collectivism. That is one of the viruses, because it's us versus them. And we see, you know, all this group of people, they're evil, you know, like all the rich or, you know, Middle Eastern people are evil. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that before Middle Eastern people were evil, it was Eastern European terrorists.
Always has to be a boogeyman somewhere.
Yeah. So it's just like, you know, a puppet that the deep state keeps using to keep the fear. If we're afraid, we're discombobulated. Like literally we become dumber when we are afraid. So if we center ourselves, if we do deep breaths, you know, it is physiologically impossible to be anxious and afraid if we're grounded, because we're doing deep breaths, we're feeling straight, you know. And, you know, you're talking about Republicans and Democrats, like, you know, we're not Republicans, we're not Democrats, we're entrepreneurs.
Right.
The entrepreneurs are no, Republicans and Democrats are the natural enemy of entrepreneurs. We're here to create, we're here to make life better. And these guys are here to regulate. So, you know, some people say, well, you know, the government is a necessary evil because, you know, who would care about the poor? Who would build the roads? What about the hospitals? Well, let's not forget that, you know, just a short 50 years ago, we had the best healthcare in the world, and it was very cheap.
Right.
People would come to the States, would fly to the States. I have aunts that would go to Houston from Mexico City to get healthcare because, you know, Mexico is like half socialized healthcare that sucks. You know, if you have money, you can get private care, but it's very expensive. So they would just come to Houston.
Right.
So freedom works. And if we let it, you know, it will work better for us. Now, okay, what about the Russians? You know, like, because that's, you know, the boogeyman messing up with the elections. Or, you know, North Korea, they have big bombs. I mean, we have the biggest bombs and, you know, more than anybody. I don't think that, like, people would really be dumb enough to do that. I think, you know, the only reason, like, Middle Eastern people, they're only acting out because of blowback. We've been bombing them for so many years. I mean, if somebody bombed my dad, I will hold a grudge and we'll try to, you know, do retribution or something. So it only makes sense that all these people are angry at us because we've been missing. And then, like, I have friends that go to the Middle East to, as they said, you know, we went to kick some ass. But what they do is they're actually taking care of opiate farms. Like, they have poppy seeds that they're taking care of, and they're killing people. It's like, so the entire thing is a mirage of shit and lies just to maintain the power for some people.
Right.
So crazy.
Yeah, it's incredible, especially with the way Iran is often labeled as the terrorist, yet very little, nothing essentially is ever said about what happened in the 50s with the CIA and Mohammed Mossadegh and the oil companies. And, you know, my understanding, I actually dated a Persian woman for about a year. And I've always found that for the most part, the people, they love the American ideals and for a long time loved America until you see the regime change and all these things that happen where, and I like that your shirt points out Democrat or Republican. It's fascinating now that we're getting, you know, more clarity on some of the things these groups have actually been involved with. And I feel like if the truth came out, obviously the Clintons being accused of a lot of things, which I wasn't there, although tend to believe there's a lot of substance to some of these assertions going around. And you know, we talked before we started about how the CIA, you know, the amazing things these guys get involved with that no one has to take your opinion or my opinion for. They can look at Oliver North standing in front of Congress 30 years ago, read about Operation Paperclip, where they're bringing in Nazi scientists who, as long as they're willing to do whatever the Dulles brothers said, you know, fine, bring them over. So it's both of these parties have contributed to that. And again, why I find the whole truth movement really has been inspiring and gives me hope and motivation to keep doing what I'm doing and what you're doing of just bringing the truth to light, because it's almost, instead of Democrats and Republicans, you think of the Corleones and the Sopranos, and it's like, wait a second, we've been trained to think we need this, but if we see a different perspective, I mean, maybe after the reign of the dollar is done, we could have an era of freedom and enlightenment after we adjust to that, unlike anything we've seen before.
Yeah, and you know, something that's interesting in that regard, right before the Civil War, this country used to be called these United States.
Mm-hmm.
After, it was the United States. So it was a union of a bunch of states that had their own laws. You know, even the Constitution says whatever it's not granted by the state, whatever, like the federal government can do it. But then it became a monolithic piece that the federal government had authority over all the states. So in reality, that is not sustainable. 325 million people under one nation with the territory that we have it's unnatural.
Right.
There is a reason why we had little states, and there is a reason why we were trading and all of that stuff. So I think that a way to be able to get more freedom will be to disband that. You know, I'm not a fan of necessarily, you know, the South with the Civil War, but I think the wrong side won.
Right.
You know, so things would have been different. Now, if we're able to, like, we're so diverse. I mean, you know, people say, well, what about the Nordic countries? They're very homogenized. It's easier to keep peace and prosperity in a place that, you know, people think the same, people look the same. It's easy. With people like us here in the States, it's really difficult. So to maybe dissect it in, I don't know, 6, 7 territories, I think that would be probably better, you know, like if they're like people in California, they like socialism, they can eat their cake if they want to. I don't want to be involved in that shit. I mean, all of those guys that have money are coming to Texas. We have 20,000 people moving into Texas every month because we are prosperous. We're the land of milk and honey at this point, until they turn it into California again, because it's like a parasitic situation.
Which again is what's nice about free market economics, and actually even applies to the cryptos, where people are saying, well, anyone can create a crypto as a currency, which is true. But when the free market allows people to naturally decide what they want, conditions are great in one place, you know, people are going to go there, as you point out. And it's funny, as you were mentioning that, how the federal government has just assumed so much of it. It almost did you ever think of the similarities between what's happening in the Tower of Babel, where again, and then you could look even on the New World Order, where it's like, we're going to play God, we're going to install from the top down, and it has failed every time through biblical history, human history, or otherwise. But it's interesting seeing that pattern play out over and over. And I know you travel a lot, and curious what you've seen some of the places. I know some of which are more free market. How are they viewing what's going on here?
You know, wherever I go, I see, whenever you're interacting with people one-on-one, everybody seems to favor freedom. And ultimately, everybody wants the same thing. I want people to be nice, healthy, helpful, and prosperous. Like everybody has that desire. Nobody says, oh, I want everybody to be poor or stupid or dumb. No. So I think that we all have the same idea in mind. We want to be free and we want to be prosperous and happy.
Yep.
So how we go about it is what differs. Now, some people say, well, we need more, discipline and more structure, more like, I need to take money out of your paycheck every month because otherwise you're not going to give. But the funny thing is, like, when they say, the 1%, they're the evil people. So suddenly and magically, once you make over $350,000 a year, you grow horns and you can't be trusted. So they need to tax the shit out of you. I'm like, I mean, it's just incredible, all these fairy tales that people still believe. So, that's on one side. Everybody wants the same thing, but how we go about it differs. Now, the other thing is, I do leadership development, as you mentioned, and everywhere we go, we help people understand that same pyramid of power, just with the one dude on top telling everybody how shit's going to run, always leads to a shitty ending. So what we do is we help them understand that it's more resourceful to turn the pyramid of power upside down, where the leader is at the bottom, removing blockages for people to be able to do work. Right. And what we call it is servant leadership or conscious capitalism. So it's not just carrots and sticks. It's like, okay, love and work are the two cornerstones of humanity, of humanness. Why do we not merge them? Instead of running on fear and coercion, we can do it out of love. Everybody's like, oh, I hate my job. Oh, well, fuck it. Go do something you like. You don't have to be stuck, or at first maybe you don't like it, but then you can move to something else. And soon enough, a lot of those jobs are not going to exist because they're going to be replaced by robots, Right. Just like, who will pick the cotton? I was telling my mom, we were talking about some of the jobs, and she's like, but what about those people? Are they going to lose their jobs? And I said, that's when I told her, like, back in the day, they said, who's going to pick the cotton? Like, what about those people? So there's the standard of living for people keeps getting better and better. Like, shit that we have right now today, like, just to think about, like, I have like 3 iPhones just sitting around here, like collecting dust. And, like, just to think that whenever I was little, like in the 80s, one phone was for millionaires, right? Like, you have to earn a lot of money to have a traveling phone. And now, like, I have a shit ton of like phones just laying around the house just because, like, the free market's so amazing. Like, literally I have like 6 phones that I don't even use.
I know where we're going to go. Next time I drop mine, I'll be giving you a call.
Like, poor people in the United States have flat screen TVs and they're fat. The freedom, the free market provides, and it, like, we become spoiled by that trajectory of our standard of living. So I think where we need to work on more is just, again, like the self-work. Like, look at all the things that we have going on. Like, this is actually pretty amazing.
Yeah, and imagine, especially if we didn't have the Fed butting in, confusing productivity or advances in technology with deflation. It's, they must be sitting there crushed that the price of the cell phone has gone down. Whereas, geez, if you didn't have someone printing the currency and building mansions and yachts for the banks with the proceeds of that, it is interesting how you pointed out that, we don't have to pick the cotton because we have a machine that does that. And I've even heard some folks talk about how without so many of these distortions in the way, it's interesting to wonder how close we could be to having so much of, rather than feeling like we need to go and work and do something, what if we were actually using these machines not to build tanks and blow things up, but really to create the products that we need so that prices like go down like on the cell phones and the cost of living gets cheaper for everyone and makes life better, which again is why I appreciate all the things that you do, because I do agree it starts with our own internal mindset. I realized there were a lot of things that I had to change of how I was looking at things and seeing what's out there. And so I really appreciate that you're sharing that. And perhaps in wrapping up, you could just let folks know some of the places they can find you and get involved in some of the great things that you're doing and helping to build what perhaps is the solution, because maybe we can't tell the Fed to do this or that, but we can change our own mindset. And when enough people are doing that, I do believe that is the true power that we really have. So how can they find more about what you're doing?
Emancipatedhuman.com is my website, and I actually got kicked out of YouTube too a while back, so I started on Vimeo. So if you find Luis Fernando Misses on Vimeo,
Okay.
I started slowly uploading videos. That one, like, I actually have to pay for, so it's you can only do like 5 gigabytes every week. So slowly I'm migrating shit there. Also Facebook, Luis Fernando Misses, Instagram as well, and I'm happy to answer any questions that people may have and to keep the conversation going, because I think that the only way out is in,
Yeah, and I appreciate that. We'll have all those links below so people can click and find out more about that. And certainly all I can say in closing is if you're worried about the economy or the stock market or the jobs and not sure where to begin, I certainly think what you're doing, Luis, of helping people with the mindset is really the first step. Not what we've been trained to think about, but that's the conclusion I've come to. And again, why it's a pleasure to have you on here. So thank you so much for joining me today, and appreciate all you're doing. And we'll look forward to catching up again soon.
Thank you so much. Happy to see you again, sir.